I would like to offer anyone a chance to offer a blessing this morning. Our guests from Ghana, I was hoping they would bless us this morning, and they're on their way. If I don't see a hand, then I might do it myself. But President Carter, would you like to? Do I see a hand? Reverend Blackman? No? All right.
Gracious God, open our eyes that we might see, open our ears that we might hear, open our hearts, open our minds, that we might receive and be changed, and having been changed, that we might share with others. Amen.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone had a wonderful rest. Yesterday was a very full day, and I'm grateful. We are all grateful to you for your contributions and for the wonderful sharing that took place. Today is our final day. This has been a long road to get here, and we have much on the program that we want to get right to. The first thing I want to do before I ask our opening speakers to kick us off into our discussion on how do we unlearn violence, which has been a fascinating discussion this weekend and this week. When we first gathered, I wanted to warn you that I'm going to ask you today that when each of us speaks today, the price of admission to this conversation is a commitment to action. So at the beginning, we all brought a vision sentence. Do you remember on Saturday morning, everybody was asked to say, what is their vision in one sentence for 2030, 2040, 2050? What is that vision of the future? What is the world we want to create so that we can adjust our actions now so that we can reach that goal of peace and universal human rights? So what I'm going to ask you to do is to think of your action sentence. What is your action that we can write down, document? We can help you put it on our new web tool as your action item, your action plan, and we will support that going forward. Is that a deal? Is that a deal? Price of admission. And I'm going to start that by saying to you that my commitment is that this forum here in person and our online forum will be a space for this conversation for as long as we are here and I am here. That this space is here for this conversation and to support those especially at great risk who are advancing human rights and peace, that this space is to support that. So now I would like to welcome our next moderator, who will bring us into this wonderful and challenging conversation on how do we unlearn violence.
Thank you very much, Karen. My name is Sita Ranchod Nilsson. I direct the Institute for Developing Nations at Emory University, which is just down the road. We focus on fostering action-oriented scholarship on global development. I'm very proud to say that the Institute was the brainchild of President Carter, and we certainly operate very much in the spirit of the values of the Carter Center, and are very pleased to be able to collaborate with Carter Center programs on a number of occasions. I also want to acknowledge, I know that President Carter, you've received many thanks during this forum. I want to thank you on a forum that's devoted to unlearning violence and educating for peace and human rights on your role as an educator. I don't know if all of my colleagues here know that President Carter is a university distinguished professor at Emory. He regularly works with students during the academic year, and there's no greater inspiration for them to get involved in this work than getting to hear from and work with President Carter. So President Carter, thank you for that. Over the years, I've had the privilege of attending many human rights defenders forums. And often at the end of those forums, there are two themes that come across. One is how difficult it is to create cultural change, how difficult it is to create and sustain cultural change. The other is the great challenge of creating and sustaining political will that's needed to support the kinds of transformations we've been talking about to bring about the world that we envision in 2030, where peace and human rights characterize our interactions. This workshop has been particularly exciting for me because it has really focused on how those changes are happening. And the question, as we've shared how they're happening on different levels, in different contexts, in different parts of the world, the question that comes to us this morning really is how to leverage those changes into broader connected social movements. It very much builds on the session that we had yesterday that focused on the economics of peace and human rights and the problems we have right now with economics that is leading us to extreme inequality and supporting violence. So it builds on that, but it really focuses on cultural change and building social movements. Some of the key themes, just to reiterate points from Karen's wonderful summary yesterday, have to do with creating circumstances for inclusiveness and connection, an emphasis on youth. So many of you are working with youth, and that's so important because according to the UN Population Fund, the population of youth in 2016 between the ages of 10 and 24 are 1.8 billion around the world. And when you look at children who are younger than the age of 10, that number gets much bigger. This is a critical population that is hungry for transformation. And also the critical need to put gender and women at the center of what we're doing, because the connections between kind of what's happening to women and all forms of violence are undeniable. So to get us started in this discussion, we have three wonderful discussion instigators. That's what I'm going to call them, because this is going to be a discussion. Our first discussion instigator is Arno Michaelis. Arno is an educator and one of the founders of Serve to Unite, a service learning program that connects students with a global network of peace builders. Arno's journey is very personal. In an earlier part of his life, he was a leader of a worldwide racist skinhead organization. He's moved away from that and now works with youth to build peace and support human rights. Arno, can you tell us a little bit about how you unlearned violence and what you replaced it with? And how does that experience inform your work with Serve to Unite?
Thank you so much, Sita. Thank you, President Carter, and to all of you who I'm incredibly humbled and honored to call my peers. It's really an amazing thing for me to be among you and to learn from this example that you set. My process of unlearning violence was taught to me by some very brave people. It was the kindness and forgiveness of people that I had claimed to hate that led me from 7 years of being a leader and organizer and a violent member of hate groups. And it was the realization of how good the alternative to violence felt that really drove me from there to here. As particularly people in the LGBT community and people of color forgave me and accepted me despite my past, and introduced me to the concepts of kindness and forgiveness and gratitude and those concepts in the context of a practice of something that we do every day and we do every time we'd see each other. It really helped me become a more genuine person. The authenticity of those highlights of the human experience served as a beacon for me to want to be a better person and to want to help people. Today, in addition to being a director of Serve to Unite, I also work as a counter-violent extremism consultant. And in that role, I've traveled quite extensively, and I've worked with other formers, as we've come to call ourselves, former violent extremists of every stripe. I have very close friends who were former violent Islamists. I have very close friends who were former violent street gang members. I have one of my dearest friends is a guy from Denmark who's a former leftist militant. And I've come to realize that the common thread of all these flavors of violent extremism is that basic human needs aren't being met. In many cases, tragically, those basic human needs are ones like food and water, which obviously have to be addressed before any sort of peace can be discussed. But in my case, and in the case of especially self-radicalized people, as we face in the United States quite a bit, those basic human needs are ones of identity and purpose and belonging. So in our organization, Serve to Unite, we try to address those needs in a healthy way. We do that through service learning, not only getting out and helping people in the community, but learning the reasons why these problems exist. So rather than just have a clothing drive for homeless people, our students will study homelessness and see the factors that lead to it and see the ways that we can truly help homeless people rather than just hand out necessary items. Combined with the service learning, we also engage our students with superheroes of peace, I like to call them, amazing peacemakers from around the world, much like yourselves. And we stitch this all together through the arts, which again is a very, as the musical aspects of this conference have so beautifully demonstrated, the arts are a universal human concept. So it really helps to build that sense of belonging, because you can understand someone else's artistic expression, whether or not you speak their language, whether or not you've shared their background. It's a way that we can connect. And as we're doing that through service learning and global engagement, these needs for identity and purpose and belonging are all met in a healthy way. So in that respect, Serve to Unite prevents violence by answering these needs before they become acute. And we're also very excited to present Serve to Unite as kind of an exit asset for people leaving violent extremist groups. As twisted as this may seem, it's true that many people get involved in violent extremism because they feel like they want to make a difference. They feel like they want to have an impact in society, and they need to be valued, not only by society at large, but most importantly by themselves. So a great way to feel valued is to know that you're helping people and know that you're making a positive impact in your community and in your society. And we've been incredibly fortunate to have many young people in the city of Milwaukee, especially from the inner city of Milwaukee, where people face incredible struggles, redefine themselves from someone who is defined by materialism, defined by the struggle that they've been born into through no fault of their own, by helping others and by seeing themselves as healers. They've now set their own definition of their value and their own definition of their role in society. And I think, we talk about empowerment quite a bit, and to me, that's what empowerment is. It's that self-realization of your worth and of your ability to help and heal other people.
Arno, thank you very much. Our next discussion instigator is Jin In. Jin is an actionist who is committed to the empowerment of girls and young women. She is the founder of For Girls Global Leadership, an organization that is committed to igniting social change movement for girls around the world. Jin, girls' education is widely understood as a key to girls' and women's empowerment, and also broader transformation that will support peace and human rights. You did a global survey in which you asked millennial women and girls what they want. What did you find out, and what does this say about the connection between the emphasis on girls' education and cultural change?
Thank you. Well, we all have to make a comment about our distinguished guest here. And my commitment to action is to replicate, amplify our president as a model, is to develop the next generation of young women who are going to be Nobel Peace Prize laureates. And that's because to unlearn violence, I think we also need to learn who may be the most powerful force for change, especially in the peace and security space. And so I just want to briefly talk about why the millennials and why females and why now. And we shared, past 2 days we've been here discussing this issue. But I want to, just for the people who are listening via webcast, is that there is actually a misnomer out there. And that is that today on this planet, there is more males than females. And that is incorrect. In fact, there is so many more males that if we created a nation, it would be the 24th largest nation on this planet, right after the United Kingdom. So truly, the greatest genocide or gendercide is really the killing of girls. There's over 100 million girls that are not alive today. Now, what is fascinating is that it's also, today we also have the largest youth population ever on this planet. Sadly, 90% of them are in the poorest countries and poorest areas. And we're not just talking about economically poor, they are also lacking in aspiration and inspiration. So, as you know, Arnold did a great segue into empowerment. We know that empowering women and girls is the most powerful tool for change, sustainable development, economic development, but I needed to know whether girls and young women were being empowered. So we launched the first ever global survey to hear their voices. And what's really fascinating is that I found, just by this quick, by a mass meta-analysis, that the word empowerment does not exist in most languages. So just imagine if a word like mother or father doesn't exist. It may not even be in their consciousness. But we found a World Bank definition that said that empowerment is the process of increasing the capacity of individual or groups to make choices and to transform those choices into desired action. And that's why I made a commitment to be an actionist and not an activist or an advocate. I truly believe that if we could empower young women and girls around the world to take action, just stand back, because they will truly transform our world. Now, the report is on 4ggl.org for those people who are listening via webcast. The participant here actually have a summary that Karen so kindly put the summary in the back so you can read along. But we measured, so we actually looked at agency, considering the fact that we translated this survey into 5 different languages and figured out 4 out of 5, there was no word for empowerment. So we looked at agency and we measured 2 indicators, voice and choice. You could see why voice is so powerful, as every one of us here want to have our voices heard. Not only is it just about speaking, but many of them actually marked that it means that I exist. Voice is power. it's both our right and duty. These are true quote that we literally took out from the survey. So from our survey, we found, and these are the highlights, again, where I could only go through the highlights, but interestingly, that even in this time, there's never been a time like now to be a girl or a young woman. In every country, they didn't get the memo that they couldn't do it. So they are truly breaking barriers and boundary. And, I think we're actually on a great trajectory because we already have a young woman or girl Nobel Peace Prize winner. And now we know there's one among us who was a nominee. So in this respect, we are actually outpacing the counterpart or the boys. But yet there is, of course, great lack of choice and voice around the world for girls everywhere, and especially today in the Middle East area, and seen by what we're seeing in the media as well. When we asked about voice, 30% of them used it regularly, and this is in economic rich countries and economic poor countries. When we asked what was the main issue, main challenge in your life, resoundingly, it was gender discrimination and violence. What's interesting is if you look deeper into the report, you will find they actually very specifically named what that violence was in every country. In the United States, it's campus rape and sexual harassment. And in Middle East, especially in Egypt, it was definitely sexual harassment. So they even named exactly what they were facing. But yet when we asked, what is the number one change you want to change in your life? Interestingly, we think that these are girls, maybe they wanted more opportunity, but it was really actually to have experiences that would help them know who they are, their purpose in life, their aspiration. I gave this presentation at a university recently, and they said, are you just talking about girls who are privileged that gets to go to college? And I said, no, that is sadly the low aspiration of adults who think that that's what girls want. The girls themselves actually are striving to be president, to be Nobel Peace Prize laureates. Their aspiration is quite high. And what's so interesting, because as we sit here and I hear about what our governments aren't doing, we asked, who is the greatest contributor to that change? And again, resoundingly, they said themselves. So they are already holding themselves accountable for the life that they want, which is absolutely extraordinary. And again, this doesn't matter if the girl's in Afghanistan or in the United States. Now, the key factor and why I think it really lends to this discussion is that I've been in this community and especially championing women and girls. I started actually doing it for the US government. And then I worked for an organization that worked with 10 million girls around the world. Interestingly, it focused on leadership development, and that's why I'm a huge fan of leadership. And we know, and when I joined this organization, it's called Girl Scout and Girl Guides, 93% of the women in Congress were former Girl Scouts. So this is the impact on society. If you give them the training and the experience, they become leaders, period. So when we ask them, what helped you to become agents of change? I call empowerment the can-do factor, the essence of can-do. They go from I cannot do something to I can do something. And when we ask them what that was, knowing that majority of our programs globally is on girls' education as the empowerment program, we thought that large of them would say education, but it wasn't. Only 17% that it was education, followed more by experience. But the number one reason that they became empowered was self-awareness, self-actualization. If you can think about the Maslow hierarchy of need, it's the top of the pyramid. So that is that is profound. So education alone does not empower women. And we know that. Even in the United States, we know that girls and young women are going to colleges much more than boys. Are they all empowered? And we ask this question also to young women in America. So, but the good news is that that means every single person, every single organization, every single school can be putting this in their program and in their curriculum. If we want to create the next generation of change makers and leaders, actionists, then it is to help them realize their full potential.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. Our final discussion instigator, before we open it up, is Musrat Kadim. Musrat is co-founder of the Payam Trust in Pakistan, an organization that is working with young people and women in the conflict-ridden northern part of that country. The organization takes an indigenous approach to peace building and local ownership. They are catalysts for social change in the region, which is affected by multiple forms and multiple layers of violence. Musrat, how do you approach the de-radicalization of young people in an area where violence is so pervasive, and what kind of impact are you having?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning and assalamu alaikum. I will call it positive transformation, because de-radicalization is a very loaded word, and we approach the boys through different ways, but one of our ways through which we approach the boys, the extremist boys, the vulnerable boys, the boys who are the sympathizers of the extremist, you call them Talibans and we call them extremists, through their mothers also. So we work with the mothers because it is so important to engage this mother, give her some sort of training in critical thinking so she would understand the first sign of anger, attitudinal change or behavioral change in her son. So this is how we approach some of the extremist boys. And others we identify through our members in the community, and I'm going to talk about that community group, which is a model that we have developed and formed and established in those conflict-ridden areas hard hit by violent extremism for decades now. The boys who I just mentioned, the three categories of them, when they come to us, we actually do this de-radicalization or positive transformation phased-wise. And it starts with self-assessment. Because the most important problem with these boys are they don't know who they are, or why they are doing this, and they don't have any aim or goal in life. So the self-assessment is the most important part of this process of transformation. And then it is self-reformation. So how do you reform yourself unless and until you don't know what is your weakness? So the self-reformation is again a very important aspect of this process. And then we give them the life skills. We also build their critical thinking because, believe me, when they are being trained or transformed or they are being taken or convinced by the other side, they don't question because the other side uses some tricks. They use the religion as a transformation of their minds and heart. So we have to counter that by using the same tactics, taking the text from the Quran within the context, and counter their narrative with an alternative and meta-narrative, so they would understand what actually the Quran says about jihad, about killing of humanity or killing of others. So in our case, this is very important. Secondly, we also work on their high minds and hearts, so they transform them. And this is what the other group does, and they do it even today. And then we also give them the skills and how to be an effective community leader. So they should have a purpose and goal in life. And then how to volunteer. so that to get that recognition for their volunteerism in their communities. And then how to be an active citizen with positive attitude. Because it was their inactiveness that led them to be an extremist. This is the process that we try to transform these young boys. And then finally, the most important part of this transformation is the offering of livelihood skills. Because like I said yesterday, economic is the key. And this whole violent extremism, this whole game of violent extremism ultimately is about economics. It's about power. And here also, economic plays its role. So we offer them livelihood skills because without these skills, they will not be productive members of their communities and their families. So the final livelihood skills definitely give them that power, the strength to now positive power and positive strength because they already had that power of the weapons, the power of the mobile, the power of the gang behind them and the support behind them. But now they have a positive power. And this transformation is healthy. This transformation gives them a recognition of a very different type. And then they are not left alone here. Once they go back to their community, in our model, community is the key. Community is the most important part of our model, where we actually had already formed mothers and youth peace groups, and Shafqat Saab mentioned it the day before yesterday. We call them Tolana. We can't call them mothers and youth peace groups because of the fear of the others that wherever we say peace, so you are being targeted. So Tolana is a Pashto word which means together. So we have to be very, very careful when it comes to protection of our groups over there. We call them Tolana, and we have mothers and youth Tolana. So once the boy is transformed, they go back to the youth Tolana. And since we have been working with the mothers and the women in those areas also, so these women and mothers, they also have formed these groups and they're a part of it. So these community groups actually help them in rehabilitation and reintegration in their community. And they also help them, they guide them, they mentor them, and they also are a part, since they become a part of the same group, then they sort of create awareness, and from here the social movement starts. From this platform of Youth and Mothers Tolana, the social movement starts because they are working for a cause, they are working against violent extremism. They are trying to actually create an awareness on an issue which people have internalized as a part of their life, that is violent extremism, which has become which has been taken by the people as normal. So when they started talking about it, people realized that yes, they've been the victims of violent extremism for years, but they have never talked about it. And unless and until the community doesn't talk about an issue which they've been facing, they can't come up with the solution. So our impact is that the community itself is now discussing it. The community itself is now trying to take that sort of the cat out of the bag that yes, the issue and the problem is there. We have been killed, we have been mercilessly victimized because of this whole violent extremism. And now we ourselves are finding the solutions. And what is the solution? The solution is the greater awareness. The solution is, of course, discussing it. And the solution is we have the solution. The community itself has got the solution to address this issue of violent extremism. And what is that? Since they are being trained on the indicators, individual indicators of violent extremism and community indicators of violent extremism. What are the indicators in the community? So once they know that what are the indicators of the violent extremism, what are the first sign of violent extremism individually and in the community, naturally, they would respond immediately as first, to the early warning signs, they would definitely come up with the early response. And the community does it itself. And that is the impact that we have created and generated. The second most important part of this whole process or the social movement is that there is ownership of the community. And one more thing about this model is it's indigenous. It's rooted in the cultural value and religious tradition of their area. So it's not challenging anyone, but it is evolving. It is growing day by day. It is expanding. It is deepening. And that is, I think, felt by many that maybe tomorrow they will challenge the inequalities. They will challenge, the different actors who are the proponents of extremism, and they will challenge the injustices around them. They will challenge definitely the transparency and accountability within the governance structures, and we feel that that's our impact that we have generated so far. Thank you.
That's wonderful, because that gets at the hope, I think, that these social movements will challenge these structures of violence and structures of inequality. So that's great. Well, these have been 3 examples from very different contexts. And given that our task in this forum is to develop strategies, not only imagine the world that we want to see in 2030, but develop the strategies of how to get there, I'd now like to open it up for discussion to ask you, where do you see those points of leverage in these stories and your own experience of going from transformation, unlearning violence, and building community to the broader social movement?
President Carter wants to ask a question.
But first, President Carter would like to ask a question.
Jen, in a practical sense, how do you teach the girls self-awareness? I know you mentioned the Girl Scouts as being one way to let them realize. What are the practical ways that you do that?
Thank you. Well, I actually believe there is a movement for all of us, every single one of us around the world, that they are looking to self-actualize. I mean, I just recently heard Google has a chief mindfulness officer. It really is teaching them about self-reflection, building skills that is creating greater self-awareness. So self-reflection, discussion, many of the same things that Arnold talked about, belonging, longing. It is really for them to go back inside. It's restoring, I think the word empowerment is actually it does captivate what we're trying to do, because it's restoring the power within that individual. And these skills can be taught, actually, or taught.
My order is being corrected. I got it wrong, sorry. Francine, you'll begin. We'll go to Laura, and then Shefkat.
Thank you very much. First of all, I should say that I'm very much thrilled by Mr. President's interest in women and girls, which is perceived by many as a women's issue. Thank you very much, sir. And regarding the participation of women, it has been said that we have better results when we have women involved in the peace-building process. But I have a little concern coming from the DRC, which, as you know, is a male-dominated society. Men have been on power for just forever. And in many cases, men are still the ones to appoint or to validate women's participation. And what we have seen is that those who cannot argue, those women who cannot question, are the more likely to be appointed. And very recently, just last year, there was a leadership program in DC, and they invited 5 women from the DRC. But it was very hard to find 5 women simply because everybody would like to appoint his wife or his daughter. So my question is, how do we make sure we have the right women in the room rather than having women in number? Thank you.
That's a very good question. Thank you. And I hope that that gets kind of picked up by the colleagues here, because that's a very important issue. Laura?
Bueno, gracias.
Well, thank you. Thanks to the interpreters for giving me my word
Escuchar y entender.
and also help me hear and understand.
Para empezar a reflexionar para mí sobre el tema de desaprendizaje.
To reflect on unlearning violence. Something happened yesterday was the murder of 12 teachers in Mexico, and at least 22 were disappeared. So then I started thinking that one of the ways of unlearning violence is also to be sensitive and becoming angry about this violence. In spite of the daily death, in spite of the daily violence that we experience in our countries, we cannot stop being unsensitive with the pain of our peoples. But we don't only need to be there, but from there we need to move forward. And from our own places, from our own countries, we need to build that, which I'm going to repeat this again, but I think it is important, is to have networks of solidarity that will imply the love, that will imply the love among ourselves, among our countries, so that we can all fight those peoples and countries for peace, so to make it our own, even though that would mean many times to live with pain, but to live with the happiness that we did not stop talking, we did not stop acting against injustices of this world. Also, we need to start thinking about the peace from the collective construction, to be able to listen to ourselves, to be able to listen to those voices of those peoples that are being victims of violence. So we need to start thinking about peace, this deep peace, this feeling of not feeling pain, not being hungry again. Also, we need to think of those violent relations. We have to think of them, of how we, for example, how men exercise violence on the bodies of women, even when they do not realize it. Many times this is an individual change that we need to be self-aware. But we need to make that individual change has to go hand in hand with the constant daily fight for changing those violent relations, those collective changes between or among peoples, in the case of Honduras, between states and between countries. So I think it is very important to mention that in Honduras, we, women, do not want weapons that come from the U.S. And among peoples, we can work about it. We say, how do we stop those funds, those supports for violence, for weapons that come from these other places? And this is also related to building solidarity among people, to build love. And finally, to talk about deconstruction of violent relationships, we have to start thinking about to establish something that is related to truth, to justice, that are part of something important in peace. So having heard about what happened yesterday, this news from yesterday, I started thinking, what would have happened if we had thought about justice and truth in the case of the 43 people disappeared in Mexico? Then we would not have to experience again other murderers, other people disappearing. So again, even when I talk about my mother again, I think it's important to wonder, to say, what would happen if we would present this justice in the case of Berta Cáceres? Will we be able to save more lives so that we can construct ourselves with peace? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm very glad that you brought up the issue of listening to victims. I think if there was a tendency in the conversation to talk about kind of transforming the violent, we also need to remember to listen to the victims. So I'm very glad that you brought that up. We have a number of speakers. I'm going to ask everybody as much as possible to try to keep your comments brief and focused on the issue at hand. Next, Shafqat Mahmood.
Thank you. I have a problem with this element of commitment to action which Karen had mentioned in the morning and the connectivity which you are talking of. I feel that we are today unleashing a program or a movement all over the world. And Mr. President, you are leading this movement, and the center is actually has given birth to this movement. I feel that the commitment to action from all of us should be those strategical and tactical actions which are marketable and doable. They are marketable and doable. And in this case, as far as your framework which is to be designed probably, that should make sure that there's a connectivity which is from top to bottom, and there's the vertical plane, as well as connectivity in the lateral plane. I lay stress on that due to the fact that there are many movements which have taken place from the top, but they never reached the bottom. So there was no connectivity. So what happened that somewhere the lower echelons, they worked for a little while, but it fizzled out. So we would like that wherever your framework, strategies, and strategical actions work, they do get in touch with the tactical level action on the ground, at the grassroots level. At the communities level is the most important area where that connectivity is required. And that connectivity as a lateral level is also very important. I would like to give you a small little example. Yesterday, when we were having the second session, I got a message from one of our old extremists who was de-radicalized 3 years ago by us. And he sends a message, a man who went in with the aim to kill a girls' school in a girls' school, but he was not actually being covered by the another extremist. But normally the process is that you wear a jacket, suicide jacket, you go in and you blow yourself up. If you do not blow, by virtue of either change of mind or by virtue of a technical fault, then as a man who is covering you, then you shoot that man shoots him. So this boy was not shot at. Why? Because he was in a crowd of girls and teachers, so he could not be shot by the man who was covering. So he got, technically his suicide jacket did not work. So he got confused and then he ran off. And he kept himself hidden for 3 months in Afghanistan. And somehow or the other, he was a Pakistani, and somehow or the other we managed to get him and we brought him to our center, and there we started talking to him. During the analysis, his self-assessment analysis, I tried to talk to him that why did you become extremist? So he said, well, how would you feel if your sister is raped in front of you and you cannot go and ask for justice? So he said that he picked up arms because his sister was raped in front of him and he could not do anything. He could not even knock the door of the justice, not the door of the police station, and nobody supported him because human right was violated throughout. So he sends a message yesterday and he's talking, he says, the message says that please be kind to your mothers. And your mothers are the ones who are your beacon. When you have pain, you lie, you keep your head in their laps to get relief. But when you hurt her, probably you have actually done the biggest damage. So I would request you, he's asking me, I would request you to transfer this message to everybody who's known. So the powerful message just says that for the last 3 years, he is connected to us. He is talking to us. And this connectivity is highly important to us because we have made internal community mechanisms, and they rise wherever there is a human rights violation. They rise, and they really rise, and they create results within no time. So I think we should look at this connectivity, and we should look at your positive and strategical framework. Otherwise, I tell you, we are all ready. We're all ready. We're all poised up to do what you are desiring. But I think this is the only hope we have. Otherwise, the conflict of interest of the nations, of the governments, of the powers, it would not let you move after another 2-3 years. So let's work for it. Thank you very much.
Shafkat, thank you very much. Charo?
Buen día para todas y todos. Well, I was thinking on the unlearning and also the way of preventing from learning. And one way of preventing is what little sister Laura was talking about, which is justice, right, and accountability. But the other that we work on in our Afro-descendant communities, which have been peaceful always and forever, is how we prevent that our children and youth learn violence from the constant daily violent environments they are immersed in, right? And I agree that one element is that of giving the person and people a sense of being, who I am, where I'm coming from, where I want to be, to where I belong. That's something that we have been working for decades, and particularly since 1993, when we were recognized that we exist in the country as different. And we work on that, on identity and sustaining that identity, so we have a sense of belonging, a sense of who we are, what we are, and where we want to be. I agree also that there are opportunities, and opportunities need to be given. Our opportunities are our territories. Our opportunities are our communities. Our opportunities are our collective lands, and that sense of cultural sense of who we are, culture. So one thing to work also on, and that we need to, and is why we struggle for, is to continue preserving, sustaining, and defending these opportunities so our children and youth, who are our, we call it renacientes, the ones that are newborn and come after us, have a future, have a way to don't learn that violence they have been immersed in. That's extremely difficult, complicated, but we continue striving for keeping our children peaceful and with a peaceful heart, despite all the things they have to go through, because that's the only thing that keeps us strong in our identity as Afro-descendant people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to assure you that as I see your tents go up, I'm recording your name, so I will get to you. Ashita, I saw yours next.
Hello, everyone, and President Carter. It's super exciting, and I'm totally honored to be here and to be able to share some of my work. I work at an organization called Breakthrough, and I work on gender-based violence in the United States, and specifically on college campuses. 1 in 5 women that are in college today in the US will be sexually assaulted while they're in college. So the work we do is about culture change, and I want to use a very specific example of some of the ways in which we engage community and actually enable people to become catalysts in their communities. So here's to action. One of the things that really struck me when Musarat ji was talking is that, strangely enough, the work we do engaging men on college campuses, our methodology is quite similar to the work you do engaging extremists in Pakistan, which is strange, but also, I guess, poignant in many ways. It is about positive transformation and unlearning violence. In this case, these are not necessarily people that have perpetrated violence, but they are complicit in a culture that enables violence. And so for us, transformation is about transforming cultural norms. How do we get these men to understand the cultural norms that they are subscribing to that enable violence? We work with fraternities in the US. So fraternities are these kind of men's clubs that are highly elitist and do a lot to support and enable gender-based violence and sort of the norms that enable the violence. So we work on engaging fraternities. We do trainings on the ground on masculinity, and we do a lot of work digitally. So one of the examples that I want to just share is men, specifically fraternity men. A study showed that 80% of fraternity men in the US feel uncomfortable when they hear a sexist comment or when they see something happening at a party that they don't think is right. 80%. But they feel unable to speak up because of peer pressure. They feel like they're the only ones who feel uncomfortable, even though it's 8 out of 10 people. So we work with those men, and we work to, and unlearning violence in this case is about explaining masculinity and the norms. And we find that men are they really want to be engaged with us, and they don't really know how to be engaged in a movement. So we use we use stories, people's personal stories, but then we also use moments in the media. So recently around the horrific incident in Orlando, we posted an article about how toxic masculinity is one of the underlying things that we need to explore around actions like that. And we engage men on Facebook. Very strategically, we engage college men. And there was this huge conversation that started, and I'm reading from my phone because this is a Facebook comment from one of our men on Facebook, and he said, "Men are conditioned to be overly assertive from a young age, yet only women are considered to be victims of gender norms." And he went on in talking about how he feels like he has been a victim of gender norms, and he's been told to be a man and be assertive. And so we basically use Facebook as a way of engendering these conversations. He made that comment feeling left out of the conversation. And we immediately responded and said, we would love your story about how you were impacted by gender norms. We would love your personal story. We would love you to be part of the movement. Right after that, he shared a story on our platform, and soon after that, he emailed us saying he wants to become a catalyst in his community. And now we're going to start working with him to sort of have him take action. So that's just an example of how we use the digital sort of means to engage people, specifically men, and how there are a lot of men that want to do something but don't know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rodolfo?
Good morning to all, Mr. President Carter. It's an honor. Allow me to speak from my personal experience. At Mexico, I work countering extreme violence against women, especially femicide. At Mexico, I have the honor to work with the feminist movement, and this has been one of the most transforming experiences in my life. As male, I have understood something. We live in a patriarchal world, a world that teaches us as men to be dominant and to be violent. Violence is part of this patriarchal experience. As males, we are taught to use the fist. The fist is the expression of the force. it's expression of the physical force, and it's the way that we have imposed this domination between males, but especially against women. This violence conforms our society. What I've learned in my experience is that we need to question ourselves as men, because men, we're the ones that we're the ones that do this extreme violence against other persons, but especially against women. This origin of misogyny, we can date it for at least 8,000 years. I think, and that's what I'm talking from my personal experience, that if we don't recognize as men that we're the principal factor of violence, nothing is going to happen. We need to recognize as men that we live in this patriarchal society, and we need to start renouncing to our privileges of using the fist, our privilege of using our strength as a way of domination and subjugation. Wars, extreme violence is the manifestation of this fist, is the manifestation of this form, as this society has teach us to be strong, to be dominant. I think that if we want to start building a peace movement, if we want to start countering violence, we need to start by recognizing ourselves as violent. We need to start recognizing ourselves as part of this problem, part and origin of this problem. If we don't do that as men, we're not going to transform anything in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodolfo. At this point, just kind of a point of order. I have 10 speakers who I need to call on and about 26 minutes. So I'm going to reiterate my call to please be kind of brief and to the point.
And one point, please do not speak too close to the microphone because it's distorting the sound. So keep about this much distance between your...
Many instructions. Fatima?
Brevity. Okay, that's a challenge. So I have few points. First, I just wanted to say thank you to our speakers. Arno, your experience is really moving. Jen, thank you for empowering girls. And Shafkat and Mussarat, I really believe in what you do. You do it differently. And what you do is you don't work with the 90% that are already, believe in the change and believe in the peace but you reach those highest risk agents, which we have always tended to just marginalize them, isolate them, because we don't know what to do with them. If it's sort of like Arno's experience was great because it says that we could reform. It's something that they want to do and they desire doing. And what we have done historically, even in my organization, Cure Violence, we look at violence and the way that it spreads in the society like a disease. So historically, society is dealt with epidemics by isolation, quarantine. That's why we were trapped in this. But in this way, you're reaching the high-risk agents and you're able to nip the problem, and that's something that we ought to do. The second trap that I feel we always fall in is, just having moralistic solutions, and we all have different ideas of what is an appropriate solution and what is a moral solution for something, and this gets us nowhere. When we think about, people as bad people cannot be reformed, this is really a trap that we're setting ourselves up to. And the third thing, and really briefly, is that one of the things that I'm really thinking about, and we're thinking about in the organization, is in terms of unlearning violence, is how do we deal with violence that seems to be outside of the control of people? You know, which is structural violence that Charo spoke about, that manifests itself not just in economy, but in state violence. What do we do about this? How do we get this to be incorporated in our language, you know, and see it as it is? It's not just, you know, development issues or, you know, lack of rule of law. It is structural violence against the community. Things like car bombs as well, you know. That's political violence. I very much appreciate this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fatima. Tracy Blackman.
Good morning. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and I want to echo my appreciation to the speakers. This is something that's very close to my heart. One of the thoughts I wanted to share about the question that was raised about how to get the right women at the table. I find that working in inner city environments, not just in Ferguson, we decided to start making our own tables, right? It is difficult to break in on a level of equality in systems and structures that are already in place and that are designed to marginalize. But I find that when we gather women together and listen and tell stories and create our own tables that have counter narratives and sometimes just a whole different experience and image, that as those tables gain their strength, that those who excluded us come and want to be included at our table. I'm not saying that's the only way, but I do want to lift that up. One of the ways I see this happening, not in my national role, but as my role as a pastor, is that we opened up our space to young girls who didn't have a place to really have their identity affirmed. And every week we hold listening circles with these girls, different ages, in affinity groups, so everyone has their day. Let me just say that. So middle school, elementary school, high school. And the whole theme of this program is I Define Me. They have T-shirts and they have all kinds of memorabilia that say, I define me. The images around the room are images of them and images that they have selected themselves as heroes or role models, etc. They bring in young professional women that they want to hear from the community. We use our influence to get people to come in and sit in what's called a hot seat. And they ask them questions about their journey. Because what happens a lot of times when you have been oppressed systemically and socially is that you have dreams of who you want to be and what you want to aspire to, but something happens to the dots between where you are now and how you get where you're supposed to be, right? And you grow up without any mentoring of that in-between section. When you wake up, it's too late to become that doctor or that lawyer because you've missed that training time. You didn't take the right classes in school. So by coming and sitting in the midst of them as professionals and as people, is quite frankly, as a woman who has her own history and her own issues that have been barriers to success, and being transparent enough to say, I've been through some things, right? I haven't always been where I am. To share those stories gives them strength and courage to speak. What we find is, and I want to lift this up and then I'll shut up. When we listen and when we see and when we minister to the hurt of others, then we interrupt hate. When we deeply listen, when we see, and when we minister to the hurt of others, we interrupt hate. And if we don't do that, if we don't create tables, if we don't have our own parties for those who aren't invited to the other party, if you keep excluding people, eventually they gain the courage to crash the party that they're not invited to. And without the listening, that crash happens in violent ways and with much hatred.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Laura Pereira, did you want to? Yes.
Thank you very much. As this is the first time I'm actually speaking in the forum, I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you so much for putting this together. It's really incredibly impressive to have all these people in the room and to also have concrete links, right, between the struggle of people in Honduras, in Colombia, in Kosovo, in West Africa, in the Middle East, here in Ferguson. I mean, it's really, really quite impressive and inspiring, honestly. I mean that. And then also thank you, especially to the last speakers. The process of self-awareness is actually quite a big part of my life. And I wanted to then link this issue of self-awareness into something that my friend Fatima brought up as well, is how to link that to the structural violence that we also speaking about, right? The increasing militarization of ordinary law enforcement activities that we see around the world. And also increasing militarization of everyday life as people are now exposed to just military occupations in many more parts of the world than we've ever seen before. You know, many studies that I'm sure countless studies have been done, right, of how law enforcement officers here in the US, for example, have inbuilt prejudices, right? They've tested how quickly they pull the trigger when they see different images, and when there are images of black people, they pull the trigger more faster than with other images. There's the testimony of the police officer in the Michael Brown case that literally described Michael Brown as almost like this kind of Hulk-like figure, this out of the ordinary, you know, there's obviously this great fear of this black man existed in his head. And I'm sure he was also playing to the prejudices of the audience as well when he was recounting that day. But essentially, you know, we talk about how people live immersed in violence, and that affects them and becomes normalized. I think also people live in prejudiced environments, and racist, ideas become normalized in different moments of time. These things are shifting in time, and we're living in a very difficult age at the moment, and I think that we see a lot of prejudices become normal. So why not use this kind of concept of self-awareness and self-transformation to also apply to institutions and police officers and training institutions for military and different personnel that will have essentially the ability to hold someone's life in their hands, right? Their security personnel with guns, because they need to be made self-aware of their own prejudices. I think a lot of law enforcement officers do not recognize that they're prejudiced. A lot of data is used to sort of convince them that, oh, we're in a poor neighborhood, this is just a dangerous neighborhood, right? So people here are going to be dangerous. And there's perhaps processes of self-awareness that we can introduce to the training of these officers so they can undo that thinking and humanize the people that they're trying to sort of safe and secure, because at the end of the day, we also, people need physical security too. They do need to rely on the presence of somebody to provide that physical security. And just as a concrete suggestion, there's so much expertise in the room of how to do that. And it's not a de-radicalization process necessarily, as that can be very loaded, but in a positive transformation curriculum or processes that perhaps we can come together and put those together in very specific contexts and just lobby national training institutions, you know, for law enforcement officers here and in different parts of the world to try to change things from within as well.
That's great, because that transformed education needs to take place there too. Thank you very much. Pee-wee, oh, you don't have your card up anymore. Did you still want to say something, Pee-wee?
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you all, and I bring you greetings from Liberia. And a special message for President Carter from the Chiefs to say that they have pledged to remain in the forefront of opening up the space for women, and that they will continue to promote that aspect. This is from Chief Zanza. I just wanted to look at a little on community engagement and how they have helped our work. We're conducting work on access to justice, where we work with traditional leaders, women, and youth. And we've realized that the community engagement part of our work has really, really worked, that we used during the outbreak of the deadly Ebola. And so we were able to create a platform of community resilience, where community people themselves would take action for positive change. And also looking at creating cultural change. We think that you have to build trust and win the trust of these people. Because it's a form of violence against women within a traditional structure. It has to do with marriage, it has to do with land, it has to do with ownership, a lot. And they don't see it as violence, the people who perpetrate this. So firstly, building the trust, let them understand where you come from. Because they often say that we condemn, we bring everything at them and say you're doing this, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. So we've started to approach it in a different way, to sit and listen to them, to try to understand why they do the things they do and the way they do it. And because we've done that over a period of time, we have won their trust, so they can now open up to us and be able to tell us why they do things. And we also know that they like to have conduct themselves not in the public way. Say, for example, people who are involved in FGM. You cannot go to the media and discuss this and then go back to them to have discussion. They will block you off. So firstly, you go and sit with them and discuss with them, because we are working with leaders that are involved into this, and they are telling us, firstly, it has a commercial component to it, and it has something that they are not able to change the political side to it. Because, like you know, Liberia, next year we go to elections, and politicians are not discussing this. They don't discuss FGM during that period, because they use the people who are perpetrating this to get vote. So they don't discuss it. And so when we talk to them, we want to know how we can change it. One of the things is they've changed the school time, which conflict with their time of school. So they go to schools and take the kids off to go to the bush school. That's a confusion right there. And also, there's no livelihood program, not from partners and not from government. Because it has a commercial side, if we have a way to create a livelihood for 4 or 5 years for these school teachers, you call them, the masters, it is believed that after a certain time, they will not go back to this practice because they have something else to be doing. That is not in place. The other thing that we've been able to do at the community level, mobilizing community, is working with a group of women that have put themselves together to engage in agriculture, because they've been having issue of persistent non-support, where men don't want to support their kids. And it's not only that, they also have issue of emotional abuse that you don't see physically. So these women are abused. So they have been trying to go to police, to go to the elders, and no solution. So they decided to come together, using agriculture as a simple thing that all of them can gravitate towards, using that forum to discuss their issues. And because they are in their numbers, the chiefs in that village decided to listen to them. And not only listening, but to support them by giving them land that they can expand on their agricultural sector. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to really commend all our speakers for taking to heart the need to be focused and brief. And in the same breath, ask our remaining speakers to try to be even more brief, because I really would like to let everybody have a word before we break in 10 minutes. Joshi?
It's a privilege, President Carter, to be here. I'm from India. My name is Joshi Jose, and I'm part of Breakthrough, which Ishita was talking about. You know, in India, we are known to be a land of Gandhi and Mother Teresa. But the narrative is fast changing. It's no longer a nation which is it's tolerant as it's known for. It's with the present government, which is leaning more toward the right-wing government, and the narrative is it's India's budget right now is $40 billion this year for the military budget is. And it's amazing, and it's also the youngest nation probably in the world. We have 356 million young people who are in the age group of 10 to 24. And you know, one of the things which we are as Breakthrough we are kind of grappling with, it's if the narrative for the young people is not for peace building, then they are going to move into the hegemonic masculinity, which is the narrative, as present narrative, which has been built up. So breakthrough is really trying to reach out, and through palatable means to the young people. We use technology a lot, but again, technology, the reach of technology into the deeper village, the rural villages, is limited. So we are trying to find innovative ways. One of the ways one of the research we found out was the mobile penetration of the mobile phones in India is the highest again. We have every home has at least one mobile phone, even in the rural sector. So we are using something called a Gramvani. Gramvani is a mobile-based radio, which if you face violence, if you face issues of intolerance at your level, issues of intolerance in your level, you can give a missed call and they will call you back. That's something which we had. So India, in a way, it's very diverse in that sense. There are almost 7 million, they say, missing girls because of the sex selective elimination. And there are villages where we work. There are whole villages where there are 35-year-old men who don't have there are no women to get married. Instead of looking at it and addressing the issue, the latest election, the manifesto was the leader who was there. He was talking about, you give me vote, I'll bring you brides. And the way they do is they actually import brides from the next state, and that's the way you do it is it's a process called bride buying. They literally give money and bride buy. And as long as these brides come home to the next state and they produce a male offspring, their life is okay. If they don't, and they are in a deep problem. So I really urge. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Joshi. Thank you very much. Barima?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'll try to be brief. So I would like to say that I'm very happy to be part of this human family we created yesterday. And to me, what makes this family strong is because we have common values of peace and human rights. So to me, unlearning violence means restoring true sense of family and community. True sense of family and community built around the principles of human rights. If we don't have that, what we risk to have is to have people that define their own values and become self-radicalized, as Arno said. You see? So what we're doing in my organization is we help communities have their vision, and we help them set the values that can help them reach that goal. And we assure them, we help them identify values that goes with human rights. And they stick to it, they promote it, and make it part of their living. And so, to finish, I would invite everyone here, our family, our human family, to try and work with communities like that. Make them recommit to the principle of human rights, as President Carter nicely said yesterday. So thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think you mentioned, I'm sure almost everybody knows, but for the webcast, your organization is Tostan, and it's a wonderful organization. Thank you, Barima. Lisa Parsons.
Okay. Jen mentioned that the number one thing was that people want to reach their full potential, and I think that's so true in combating violence. And I think language, we know, is very important. I think it was Josie was saying that in India they define the man and the lesser man, the man being the very masculine, the lesser man being he who cannot get that quality. And that triggers violence. In the sense of the full potential. We have no word in English that really lets us define what is that supports the blossoming of full potential for individuals, communities, and the world, and that which obstructs or destroys. So several years ago, I came up with a word that I felt like we could insert, and I would encourage all of you to do that in your own language. So in English and French, proflurien means, pro meaning support, fleur spelled with the French fleur, which is to flower, and ien like librarian, historian, etc. So proflurien can be used as an adjective or a concept. So it could be peace. Everyone would get that that is proflurien, right? It's a state of being that allows for all of us to blossom our hearts and minds individually, for our families can blossom, our communities get bigger and more connected when there's peace. The country isn't spending money on war. We can invest in human potential, and we can invest in the whole human family and get connected to the rest of the world rather than being divided. So when you're determining policy, when you're determining decisions within the community, when you're determining things even in relationships in your own life, if you can say, that's proflurien, you know, you get the votes.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Disflurien, I just want to say, is the opposite. So war would be disflurien for the obvious reasons. President Carter is a proflurien. There are those that we could name that are disflurien. And if they could be named that, it would also help make decisions.
I love that. Thank you very much. Sister Simone?
Thank you for this opportunity. 2 brief points. I think one of the big tensions that we're talking about that generate violence and this lack of identity or belonging is the individualism that Western nations, especially the United States, has created as its dominant cultural theme. And if you feel an individual, then you don't have that meaning. And the challenge is to reweave a sense of community where that we know we're one family and we are not separate. And I think one way that we haven't mentioned is the dominant presence of global television or global export from Western nations of violent media. And that dominant genre of media creates this sense of what is power. And the effort to create new tables, the effort to welcome in those who are left out, the effort to create meaning, I think is the antithesis of that violent genre. And I wonder, after the fabulous music experience, if there is some possibility to influence and create a more community-building genre that could help reweave the fabric of our global society, and that there's power here to begin to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Simone. Lynn Green, I'd like to get you in if you can get right to it.
It's 2 seconds. It really is. It's a comment on self-awareness. And as I speak to young women in businesses around the world, I think one of the questions that I'm often asked is, what does it take to be a good leader? And I find many women are very surprised when I look back at them and I say, be a woman and be who you are. Because being a good leader is, quite frankly, often expressing those talents that come naturally to women. They're good communicators, they're good collaborators, and they are very willing to go to the tough issues, sort them out selflessly, and find solutions. So I think in the self-awareness proposition, if we tell women that what they feel instinctively inside themselves is a good paradigm to follow, I think that helps bring about more leaders, because it's often leadership is defined as male, and we need to redefine it as female.
Amen. Michael, you say your point is very brief.
President Carter, colleagues, and guests, regretfully, unlearning violence is not an option because that skill remains. However, you can influence the intensity and frequency with which it is exercised. Unfortunately, we cannot prevent our young people from seeing violence, but what we can do is build their understanding of the moral and functional superiority of using other skills that wage peace, skills to deal with conflict non-violently. And when we do so, that's where we're able to bring about the transformation. The vast majority of all conflicts today occur in extremely young populations, many of them with over half their population as children. Yes, that represents a risk factor that they will continue to exercise the default response for conflict that has been modeled for them, but we must remember that it is also an opportunity. For they represent what I call a malleability quotient within that country. And most of these war-affected countries have a very high malleability quotient, but we must exercise our opportunity to nurture those young people with peace-building passion and a variety of skills to be able to deal with conflict in a pro-social, participatory, and peaceful manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Your contributions have all been fantastic. And of course, we are out of time, which is always the sad part of the story, even though I feel like this room is so full of hope. At this point, I would like to call on the representative of the National Chief Imam of Ghana to close our session, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
God, most compassionate, most merciful, good morning. Honorable assistants from here and from all parts of the world, I would like to greet you, and I would like to express my fullest thanks for your presence and for the great interest you're bringing to this wonderful event. I would like to start my intervention with a hadith of the Prophet. Honorable assistants, please know that women have been subjected to very difficult circumstances, both in the pre-Islamic history, and she has she has suffered from tribulations and vice, and she has gone through misery and has been subjected to the systematic treatment of various groups. In the prehistoric era, women were considered like slaves and livestock, and she was even described as being filthy, and it is very, very sad to see this and to realize what the woman has gone through. She was not even considered to be a human being and was not even considered to be human. She was at the service of man and was exploited and taken advantage of. And some even said that women were a necessary evil in the pre-Islamic history. She was really seen as someone to be filthy. She was even buried alive. She was she was killed upon her birth, and it is very sad to see all those circumstances through which women have gone through. Women was
very, very exploited and was subjected to various difficult situations. At this time, women were even considered to be machines and slaves, as I said. And I am so sad to see that women have gone through crime scenes, but in Islam, women and men are considered to be on an equal footing. And Prophet Muhammad said women and men are considered to be equal and are considered to be on an equal footing. Islam provided women with rights and with situations whereby they were considered to be equal with men, be they women or girls. They are considered to be sisters, mothers, and a very important factor in society. So in Islam, there is no difference between her and the men. She is a school and an important pillar in the religion, but without her, society cannot advance. And I am very, very happy to see this position highlighted, the position of women highlighted in Islam, and see how valued and see that the fact that she was held in high regard and in high esteem. Peace be upon you all, and thank you very much for listening. And I would like to express my fullest thanks, and I am very honored to be here with President Carter. I wish you a long life, and I am very honored to be here with you. Peace be upon you, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. This was a wonderful session.